Activate your energy.
Welcome to the Activated Authors Podcast, a show where we distill the core principles of what it takes to become a happy, healthy, and productive author, no matter what stage of the journey you're at. I'm your host, Daniel Willcocks. I'm an international best-selling author, as well as an author coach, speaker, and creative entrepreneur. But most importantly, I'm a lifelong student of all things productivity, psychology, and human behavior. Thank you for joining me for today's episode. Without further ado, let's dive in. What is up, Activators? And welcome back to another episode of the Activated Authors Podcast, and officially welcome into the year 2023. My name is Daniel Willcocks, joining you every single week, and here with me is...
Samantha Frost. Hello, that's me.
Hello.
I'm doing a little 2023 work. Oh.
I love it. We made it. And obviously this isn't the first episode of 2020, but it's the first Dan and Sam appearance of 2023. So how's it rocking? Give us your breakdown of Christmas. Show us your breakdancing moves. What did you get for presents? Were you good? Did Santa come? How did it go?
Okay, right. Well, breakdown for Christmas. What did I get for presents? Stuff and things, and I liked them.
Yes.
What was the next question? Oh.
Did Santa come?
Yes, and he enjoyed it very much. And there was only minimal staining on my sheets.
Jesus.
My tooth is still broken, but I do intend to get it fixed at some point. I got COVID, still got it. Twisted my ankle. My son threw up everywhere on the first day back at school, so we couldn't go back to school on the first day back at school. And at 4 a.m. in the morning when I was suffering with COVID, I was on hands and knees, scribbling vomit up from the carpet. And Happy New Year. I got a ditto, so that's making me feel good about it. What about you? Tell me everything.
Wow, that was a whirlwind. Yeah, I have COVID also currently. So I don't think it's affected my voice, but if for any reason I sound a bit strange, that's probably why. I was saying to you before we were recording, like I feel fully functional. I just feel a bit ill.
Lucky, I did not get that. I just got fully dead.
Yeah. Well, it's a bit nicer than so last year I had like a full day of wipeout, which I do think I'm kind of attributing that to COVID, but I do think also it was like post finishing work wipeout that I normally have. But I didn't get that this year, which is one of the biggest wins that I've had in like half a decade, is the fact that I've managed to get into a Christmas and not wipe myself out from overworking. So yeah, I'll take that as a win. I did not catch a ditto over Christmas. I did catch a couple of shinies I'm very happy with. People wondering, this is Pokemon Go. Feel free to message us your friend code and we will add you and we will play along on the Pokemon Goes with you.
We 100% will. That's not a false promise. Nope. I need more friends.
Just generally. And yeah, no, it was an amazing Christmas break. It was nice to see family. I got to spend 5 days over Christmas, or the actual Christmas period, with my son, which I didn't get to do last year because I had COVID, so I did not take that for granted. And yeah, basically, I don't know where to go with it. All of the things, all of the time. We're in 2023. I'm trying to think of what to go in the updates because this is the first one back. I'm a little bit brain fried. Both okay. I'm going to put you on the spot. What is your key takeaway?
My key takeaway is that catching a ditto when you have to a ditto when you have to walk into town to top up your gas because energy prices, you all know, on a twisted ankle is the best thing that can possibly happen to you. So I was feeling pretty damn sorry for myself, I'm not gonna lie. I was limping at limp face, or just going up into town. I caught the ditto and I literally I screenshotted it and sent it to Dan, and I was like, now I know that 2023 is going to be my year, because I've been trying to find a ditto for quite a while.
For months.
So my key takeaway is that, there's good in the bad. And just to remember for me, just a reminder for myself to look for the good in the bad. I really do have COVID and my brain really is a little bit fragmented. And between you and me, that is saying something.
But yeah, that's
you.
I was so excited for you when you called that ditto. Like when I got that screenshot, because it has been, I think probably around, it could potentially be like July, August time. Like for people that have never played, you get little challenges on your game, and one of them is to catch a ditto. And ditto hides itself as other Pokemon, and they are rare as it is. So you basically have to catch everything until you find one.
Yep.
But yeah, huge.
It's hiding in a Lillip.
Yeah.
Oh, for people that were wondering.
I don't know that I have a particular key takeaway. I think over Christmas,
not good enough.
Well, no, I think over Christmas, I've allowed myself just to enjoy the things I want to enjoy. I am working through the final, I say backlog like it's an administrative task, it's all self-choice, of books that I've kind of agreed to read for other people. And I'm kind of just allowing myself at this point to be a bit more free with my consumption of media, of film, of TV, of books, and all that kind of stuff, and just enjoy the role of story again. So I've been working for a lot of like non-fiction. I've got my way through a bunch of different fiction. I'm finding myself very, very pulled into the direction of cosmic horror at the minute. Yeah, which for people who are unaware was kind of founded by Lovecraft, problematic author. His writings are amazing. But it's all kind of like based on space, existentialism, like things that can't be explained. And it's all very big and abstract a lot of the time, which is one of those things that I know I've spoken to you about, but like in the times where I've just written for me, my stories have leaned that way anyway. And it's kind of nice to be reading other people's work and being like, oh, I get this. Like, this is kind of like, it just feels familiar. And like, I've kind of, been on a journey of narrowing down my niche for years. I've gone from, dark fiction, post-apoc, horror, urban fantasy, horror, and to kind of be like, I don't want to box myself in as a particular author, but like to know that there's an area where I can push my books and market and reach people is very comforting. And the other takeaway as well is that like, if I stop doing all the things I think I should be doing and allow myself to do the things that I want to do, I end up doing the things that I know that I should be doing, which is a really nice feeling to have, to know that like, when you take the pressure off, the things you want to do are the things you're already doing. So over the past few weeks, I've not like worked a lot, but I've been diving in and out of doing lots of different things. Like eagle-eyed viewers who are watching on the YouTube will notice some differences to our uniform. Me and Sam are now sporting the brand new Activated Authors logo, Papal, which looks like a play symbol. That is a book that is also a lightning bolt.
Yeah.
Pretty boss. I'm very, very happy with it.
Yes.
But yeah, I've gone through.
Duke, mate.
Thick as Duke. But I've basically just been going through tweaking a bunch of stuff on Activated Authors. I'm overhauling the website for the Daniel rebrand, as it was coined by the community. But I'm trying to make everything on the website as easy for people to find and follow as possible. And yeah, I'm just enjoying it. I'm just like I put together an article, a couple of articles over Christmas, at the end of the year roundup. One that was kind of my top things that I've enjoyed for this year, including books, films, all that kind of stuff, albums. And another one that was all the wins from the Activated Authors community. And it's just really, really rewarding to see the impact that this group is having on people. Because it's very easy to get into the thick of it, to get into the weeds, and just to not see it, to forget about it, or just to take it for granted. But when you compile everything and put it all together, it's really, really astonishing.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's something I'm doing at the minute as well. If I get the chance to use a word that I don't get often a chance to use, I've been throwing that into conversation. So be prepared for some superfluous word choices.
I shall do my best to be flabbergasted at your vocabulary.
Flabbergasted. I am rather verbose. But yeah, I think with that, let's get into the wins from the community. So kind of on that vein, I do want to go through and just call out some of the wins that we have had from the Activated Authors community as a whole over the last, throughout 2022. So these are some of the big wins from Activated Authors in general, and they include the fact that we raised or drove the campaign to raise almost £15,000 for Ukrainian refugees. And we had hundreds and hundreds of authors from across 40 different countries collectively write over 2 million words in a single week, which was
hot fucking warming,
beyond
impressive.
Yeah, the Activated Authors podcast, this very podcast you're listening to, launched in February of 2022. It was an extension of the Great Write Share podcast, but over 2022 has generated over 10,000 downloads in its first year, which again is
so lovely.
Yeah, it's awesome. So thank you everyone who listens, who comes back regularly, who is subscribed, who shares, all that kind of stuff. We saw over 100 authors pass through the online community this year, some joining us for a few limited run programs, others staying for the whole year through.
All of them gems.
all of them absolute fucking diamonds. For the third year in a row, we achieved 80% success rate with the 50K writing camp, helping writers move towards writing and finishing their books. And there will be more of those coming this year, so keep an eye out for that. Our core team grew larger. Sam joined us as a co-host to this show, and Emmy Beat and Eden Collier joined us as Activated Authors ambassadors and helping out behind the scenes with Zooms, with accountability, with lots of cool stuff. Which again really genuinely wasn't something that I saw happening in 2022, but like I'm very, very thankful they did.
Hey, I didn't see anything that happened in 2022 happening in 2022. You're good.
And we ran 2 successful mastermind cohorts, helping authors find agents, putting themselves forward for award nominations, and getting their author business off the ground, which is massive. It might sound like I've run out of things to say, but I haven't, because there's more stuff.
There's more stuff.
There's much more stuff. So these are directly from members of the community. Replace the I, as I'm saying it, with the person of choice in your head. Whichever avatar you pick, you're probably wrong as to how this person looks, but that's not the point. So in terms of how authors have progressed their author career, I'm just going to read it as it is. I wrote 10 books this year and I published 5. I applied for a writer in residence position, even though I was up against a pretty major competition, which is huge. I am now working with an educational publisher on my nonfiction work. Massive. I finished the first drafts of a reader magnet, as well as book 1 and book 2 in the new series. I found my first ever beta reader. I changed genres and I'm loving it. This year, I finally finished the infamous book 4. That one's massive. It's been a long time coming. And I am redacting names just because I haven't asked permission to use any of them. So that's why I'm going in the eye. About the community itself, we've got write-ins. Oh my God, do I love having regular sprint time with other writers. We've got writing sprints. Damn it, I love those evenings and occasional afternoons with all the amazing peeps. And then I've got, for the first time ever, I felt like I actually belong somewhere with people who understand what it means to tease out the strange, wonderful, sometimes terrifying shit from our beautiful minds and put it onto the page.
That makes me so happy.
I'm still not done. Mindset.
And the hits keep coming. That's all I can do for copyright reasons. Go on.
I think the biggest win this year is actually believing I can make a go of it as a writer. I went into 22 wanting to be a writer. I'm going into 23 as a writer. Pause for effect.
That makes me sex wheel a little bit. Go on.
That's, yeah. I started telling people with shaky confidence that I am a writer, business owner, and multi-passionate creative. I'm proud of that.
Yep.
I think the best and biggest win is being part of this group has helped me build back a lot of confidence that got squashed when I was working outside of my home. That's something we get a lot, is like people come back to their love of writing and discover other people that love writing and suddenly go like, I'm allowed to do this.
Yeah.
Oh my God, like nothing's stopping me except myself.
That was incredible. Thank you.
And then the last one, mindset, I'm still writing, which I'm super proud of myself for, which again, we've got under the 50K writing camp stuff at NaNoWriMo. I won NaNoWriMo again, but I learned more about myself as a writer and how to balance my personal life. I smashed Nano, which isn't something I've ever done before, alone, but that changed because of the Activated Authors community. I smashed Nano, I won Nano again. And then my final category that I pulled out for these is health, which again is like paramount to all of this author business. Health. I gave myself permission to slow down and stop when I needed to put me first. Like I really want to, like, I'll do the next one and then I'll really highlight these because this I think is some of the things that I'm most proud of. Recognize the starting signs of burnout and gave myself permission to just stop for a while. The health combined with the mindset stuff, like all the rest is fucking fantastic. And I really genuinely love every single one of these that we've read out. I've read out. And that wasn't a dig. But health and mindset, like that is kind of really is the core of what Activated Authors is. It's the whole reason this started. It's the stuff that really like fires up my passion. It's the thought behind the word activate, because I think people see activate and they might be caught up in the world of like the 10,000 writers, the people that publish like a book a month, which like arguably if you're doing that, you are activated in some way. But I really do think that they are more the minority than the majority. And we get a lot of people coming to the group and they're like, I'm sorry, I'm a slow writer. I only managed like 100 words in that sprint. And I'm like, no, that's normal. That is normal. Like I am a freak. I will say that you're a freak because you can write fast. But that's genuinely not the norm. And I think being in a group that you know, you're surrounded by people who are of the same ilk as you. They support you in that. They share that, and just identifying those moments where life is going to put you on pause. Life is going to test you, and you need to step back. And like, obviously, we want to be writing all the time, and we want to be creative, and we want to put stuff out in the world. But the reality is that's just not a thing that's going to happen every single goddamn day of the year. Like people who, or the people I know that are very, very diligent and are of the very, very high performers, even they do like 6 days a week and they'll have a day off, take that time, and they'll be very, very disciplined. And when they say they write every day, they write for 2 hours every day. And then that is their cutoff time. Like, so those things, go on.
Sorry, I was just going to say, we're not machines. Like with the advent of kind of indie publishing in the way that it is now, I think there really became pressure on this model of write fast, publish fast, and keep going. And the truth is, for most people, that is not a sustainable business model. Like there are some people that can just write fast and do, and that is, and you know, that's fine for them, and you know, and they can get books out that quickly. But for most people, that's not the case. And I think because like this fast publishing model, particularly in things like Kindle Unlimited, is particularly rewarded by like voracious readers that like kind of that kind of thing. A lot of the time you see those writers kind of, you know, they earn money, they're interviewed in things, and then it becomes this idea that is the way. And the truth is there's so many other ways. You know, you don't have to kill yourself to be a writer.
Yeah, I won't say who it is, but an author friend of mine, she writes 13,000 words a day, Monday to Friday. Which it's phenomenal, it's exceptional anyway. But there's a couple of factors that make that possible. Is the fact that when she began doing that, her husband stepped back and became full-time parent for the child. And, you know, she's at home, but she will work from, I think it's 8 o'clock until 6 o'clock, just writing. And it's what, 10 hours? 10 hours a day, obviously probably a bit of a lunch break. But, you know, her life is built around a way that she can do these words. She fucking loves what she's writing. And she's passionate about cracking out drafts, and that is what she does. Or, you know, this was a couple of years ago, so it might have changed at this point, but like that was how that is built. Like the life was built in a way to make that happen. I'm sure he won't mind me saying, but like Jonathan Yanez, there was a certain point where like I asked him how he manages to like stay so disciplined, do XYZ, and it's because his wife helps him run the business. They work as a pair, so it's not just yourself, which for many of us it is. Like I remember when I first began, it was just me in a room focusing on my business. Like my partner at the time, she had her own job, like we obviously had to like raise Bailey and everything else. It was me alone. And so being able to do the stuff that he does would not have been able to do. And at the same time, he is full-time.
And I think that's true for most people. Like I'm a single parent. My kid is 12, so I have to make sure, you know, that he's awake and that he goes to school and that he is fed, and homework and all of the stuff that comes along with just, you know, looking after a kid. And then I have to keep myself alive. You know, I don't have 10 hours a day to, not that would suit me, but say it did, I don't have that time, and most people don't. So I think it's just that thing of, I saw that I showed it to you, the Mel Robbins reel, and I'll pop it I'll find it and I'll pop it on the Instagram, where she's saying people need to stop comparing themselves to single people or people that have like a team around them, or like, you know, finances and stuff, because most advice and things that we hear from people in the kind of the self-help, self-development space that gets to us, because obviously these people are big now, we're not tweaking and applying to our lives. We're trying to put it in directly. And as Joe Lycett said, yes, we do all have the same 24 hours as Beyonce, but not the resources, Sandra.
Absolutely true. If I had like just infinite money and a team to like, I don't know, clean my house and cook my meals and to like do my shopping and, you know, XYZ, I have so much more time to be able to be more productive. But yeah, you have to work within your means. And I do think that's probably a very, very apt point to say now, because I know in the last podcast, It might have been the one before. I mentioned that I was working on the Activated Authors Matrix, or the Author Activation Matrix. It is done. It is finished. It is now up online. And so if you want to, well, I'll explain what it is first. So the Author Activation Matrix is basically a self-diagnostic tool to help you identify where in your life you can make small steps to improve, where you are excelling, and just to give you a clearer picture on what's going on. It's a tool that was very, very impactful on myself when I came across like the basic concept behind it a few years ago, because it takes into consideration, like, are you drinking? Are you sleeping? Where is the joy? Are you seeing family? Like, it's all these different sort of concepts that are very, very core to you as a human. Remember, why authors are human.
Yeah.
And at the time, it was a case of like, I don't know, if all the scores were quite high, but then you'd see that your sleep was low, you'd be like, right, my next smallest step is to focus on sleep. If I can bring my sleep up, everything else as a whole lifts itself up.
Yes.
So I took that basic concept and rewrote it and adapted it in a way that it would work for authors. And so there's like areas in there for health, for social, for authors. And it's a 2-minute exercise. You literally just download the sheet from the website, circle some numbers. There is an online calculator that you can use to make things a lot easier. And it just helps you identify what you probably should be working on next.
Yeah.
And it's again, like, very much the core of what this Activated Authors is, because I think we go into, or every podcast that I listen to that is about authors, it's all about like, how do I write more? How do I publish more? What is marketing? How do I sell more? But there's no like, am I eating well? And in eating well, your mind then works well. Are you sleeping? Are you drinking? Are you seeing family? Are you taking time off? You know, like, what areas of your business do you feel you're doing well in, and what don't you, and where can you improve that? And the whole concept is like, in the end, you get an overall score. I think it's out of 260 in total. And say like, and I will be honest, like, the first time I did this diagnostic myself was a couple of weeks ago, and I think I got around, actually I might be able to find it, no, because then that'll take time out. I think I got around, so not the highest, because I know there are certain things that we're working on, and you have to be honest with yourself because it's a tool for you. But the idea is that in the course of 1 month, can you bring your score up 5 points? It's not a whole lot. It's like 1 in each area. So if you want to find out more about that, if you want to download the tool and use it, that's activatedauthors.com/matrix. Or you can see all the free resources that are now growing on that list at activatedauthors.com/free. Very on the nose.
I love it. Yeah. Do we have, before we kind of dive into the meat of this episode, do we have an episode coming up in regards to just like mental health and stuff? I can't remember.
Not a specific one.
Okay.
To be honest, and this is for people who want to see transparently behind the scenes, we are planned for the next 3 episodes. So it's something that I need to look at this week as to what the next few blocks are going to be like, because we're going to start bringing on some guests for one of our limited series as well.
Yeah, we are.
Which will be a lot of fun.
Okay, cool. Just something we could talk about.
Yeah, it will definitely be on the agenda at some point. When's Mental Health Awareness Week? Cool.
I'm always aware of my mental health, so I don't really pay attention to the vanity weeks.
Okay, into the question. What is the question, Sam?
The question is, how do you edit? How do you self-edit?
Well, so how do you edit a book? How do you self-edit? What does the editing process look like?
Well, first of all, I'd just like to say, I think this is an incredibly important question, because this was the very first question I ever asked you.
It's one of the big questions I get asked a lot.
Yeah, because so the first time I ever spoke to Daniel's face via a webcam was back in 2020, and it was at the end of one of the first sprints for boot camp. And I have this thing, call it anxiety, call it whatever you want, vanity, I don't know, that like, when someone asks, does anyone have any questions, I can wait happily for about maybe 2.1 seconds before I start to itch that no one has any questions. But I always have questions, so I wait that long because I don't want to be that person that's like swallowing everyone else up because I'm just asking the questions. But yeah, that was the question I asked, like, how do you edit? Because we're told how to first draft, right? Sit your ass down, put your fingers on the keys, and just go until you get to the end. Like, don't look back, don't edit as you go, don't do any of this stuff, just go. And that feels wonderful and liberating. But then the problem is when you get to the end, you've got a big old mess. And you can edit a mess, you can't edit a blank page, but it is difficult. And I think the first thing really to tackle is putting it down. So like the very first step of typing the end is do a little dance. Go get a drink.
Whiskey, sit in the bath with a pizza.
Yeah, you do you, like whatever you need. Because the truth is, obviously, you've been laboring over this, but then I think it's about taking it a stage at a time. And when you've never done it before, it is so overwhelming and you don't know what the fuck you're doing. And it is huge. It's like, you know, that card game 52 card pickup, the joke where you're like, have you ever played 52 card pickup? And then like the poor naive person's like, no, and you just like lob a deck of cards in the air and you're like, pick them up. That's what editing's like, but it's like 5,000 card pickup. So yeah, I think you take a break and then you have to take it, first of all, like a page at a time. But also if you chunk it up into the things you're editing, so like there's no point trying to line edit as you're going through, you know what I mean? And you also need to know what you're editing. So take a break, read it through, like cover to cover, start to finish. Make notes if you absolutely have to, but don't touch the actual manuscript itself. For me, I think. And then the first thing you need to do is like make it make sense. I think. What about you? I don't want to go through like all of my like 500 steps of how I've edited. What's the first thing you do when you edit something?
No, I think you're tackling it perfectly. I think putting it down is huge. Having some, or putting some distance between you and your work is massive. Like I have done it before where I've written a book and then I've gone straight into edits. And you know, you can make it work, but I think in the beginning you definitely want to put it down for a week, 2 weeks at least, just to let your brain mellow, go on to other things, because when you come back with a different eye. And that's the very important thing. First drafting, like you say, is a very specific zone of your mind, whereas self-editing, you have to get much more critical and you have to look much more analytically at what you've written, and it's a bit more arguably cold and passive. So yeah, absolutely, put some distance between you and the work. And then I mean, in my notes I've put start big. Like, you know, what I generally do is I will put my draft onto a different device to read. I use BookFunnel to put my manuscripts onto my Kindle so I can read the story through as if I'm reading a real book, which it's all really is mindset stuff. It's really, really powerful that when I'm working on Word, I know that I'm like, well, when I'm working in Scrivener, I know that I'm drafting. When I work in Word, I know that I'm editing. And so if I'm reading on the Kindle, my brain goes, I'm reading. And so it will spot a lot more things as a reader rather than as a writer or an editor. So that's what I do. I'll go through, I will read the whole thing. I might sort of tap on it, make some notes, like just general thoughts and things, as you say, like not changing anything, which is a good thing about putting on another device. Some people print it off and read through it, like do that, scribble and do bits and pieces. But yeah, you have to start with the big stuff, because if the story with a big S is not in place, like lines don't matter. Like I've done it before, especially early on in the beginning. I think it's a very easy mistake because you don't know how to do it, where you're just like going over the same lines again and again and again. And then you realize you don't need these lines because that chapter doesn't make sense. Put it all, and you've essentially wasted that time. And I will very, very quickly add that like how we're talking now comes from a bit more experience in self-editing. Like when I first self-edited, I just rewrote the thing side by side 17 times, allowing my brain to get more familiar with the story and trying to like detect bumps as I was going. But this is certainly how I approach it now. So yeah, read through it, make notes just to see how the story feels, because at the end of the day, we've spoken about this before, like the story with a big S is where it's at. Like if the core bits aren't in place, if there's no villain, if the hero isn't strong enough, if there's no sort of critical reason for the hero to be doing anything, none of it matters. Like, is the story rising in tension? Is the end resolving whatever it is at the beginning? All these kind of core points of structure, if they're not there, it like none of it matters. So start
No.
with big stuff and identify what those are.
Yeah. And I mean, you'll have probably heard Dan say this before, but like readers will forgive, or most readers. I mean, look, there's trolls everywhere, but like a genuine reader that is picking up your book to enjoy it will forgive like the odd spelling mistake, but you know, huge kind of unresolved storyline issues are something else. Like, you know, I've often read a book and there's a small typo and it'll catch me for a second, but by the end of the book I couldn't tell you what it was, where it was, or any of that, but I can tell you exactly how that book has made me feel. So yeah, I think the first thing you really need to look at is story, and just, you know, does it make sense? So I'll give you an example. When I was going through Heir to the Universe for the first time, which is my work in progress, there were quite a few times where like one of my main characters was in the scene in my head, and then I'd read it and I'd be like, where the fuck did Memnon go? Memnon's supposed to be there, and it's like it would read like, you know, Astrid Memnon walked da 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 da, and then Astrid's having a conversation and apparently Memnon is just quite happy to just sit there during like a 6-page like dialogue about something crucial that they definitely know something about, and just, I don't know, look at the sky. So it's about like noticing those things, and just like I will make notes like again on that first thing through, or like use the square brackets kind of thing, because I think the problem is if you start to make changes too early, it can really change the course of the story. So the thing is you can't hold a whole book in your head, sure, but what you can do is you can make the big points, the big note points. Okay, you know, this needs more attention. And then when you get to the end of it properly and you can look at the notes, just give yourself a little bit of time to digest that. If you prefer to write your first draft in like the planning mode, then get out however that is for you. So for me, it's post-its and pictures and all that kind of thing, and just work little scene scenarios that can help fix that, or rework a scene. And then for me, I like opening a separate document to, if I have like complete chapters or like huge important scenes that I need to either write or like really rewrite, I will do it in there. Just because then I don't feel the pressure of it has to match this or it has to match this. I can just, you know, I can do those big pieces. So once I've kind of got that done and those huge pieces are in, the next thing I like to look at is characters. I'm just making sure that like each character that I have in there, as in like a secondary, tertiary, you know, characters, because you kind of you're focusing on your main character like through the first draft, so hopefully most of that's done. But like, do all the secondary and tertiary characters, are they relevant? Do they need to be there? And if they do they have a separate voice? Are they there for anything other than like pushing the story? Does it feel like they're just there to push the story? Does it feel like they're plot devices? Because I hate that as a reader. I'm like, oh god, like so then I'll go through and I will work each of my characters to make sure that they sound different and separate. And that's something I got from you. I remember you giving me that tip, like character voice is important, so like make that a thing. Yeah, what about you?
I think no, absolutely. So look at those sort of big pieces, get all those big puzzle pieces moving, and then it's a case of, and again, this is very, very different if you're brand new versus when you've kind of been doing this for a while, but just start chipping away at the story, start making those tweaks, start looking at, like you say, Sam, just, is this character necessary? Can be combined to another character? Look at sort of like the big plot point. Is your world feeling real? And one little tip that I've got for this is that when I first went into self-editing, the first time, I would sit down with a book that is very close to what I was trying to emulate. Let's be honest, like we're not writing this from scratch, like we're influenced by people. And I would spend 5-10 minutes before an editing session and before a writing session as well, but before an editing session, just reading through an author that I loved that was close to what I was trying to write, so that I could kind of try to capture some of their tone, try and like see if I can like absorb some of it through osmosis, look at paragraph structure, how sentences and things worked. I wouldn't get that deep into fixing all that stuff yet, but like as you go through, just try and like smooth some of the story over. Because what then comes next is one of the things that scares people the most. So you've looked through, you've made your notes, you've done some big structural changes. Maybe you've come through again and like sort of tweaked things and tidied things up. My next bit of advice that I would say without argument, like fundamentally, give it to someone else.
Yep.
Because what I see a lot of is people that are so precious about their story, arguably so, like they're terrified of all the work they've put in, like being crushed, is spending hours and hours and weeks and days and weeks and months and years spinning over the same story to get it, quote, perfect before they then give it to a reader.
Yep.
Often they'll give it to the wrong reader. So we'll go into that in a second, but putting all that work in to then give it to a reader who will then go, well, this doesn't work. And it's a very, very big structural thing. For me, I want to know before I've put in all of the effort, all of the finesse of like polishing the story, the lines, like character dialogue and everything else, that this story, capital S, works. And so as a perfect example, I wrote the first draft of the Nowhere line before Christmas, and I handed it over to you to have a read through. It's very, it's deliberately quite poetic. It's very sort of dense in what it is.
It's lofty.
It's very, very lofty. It's very verbose.
It's so purple.
It really
it's gorgeous. Really is what it is.
So I know that someone like you, who is, you know, dealt in poetry, but also has read some of my other stuff, you're a very, very good reader for that. And so what I wanted from that wasn't like a line by line, what works, there's a typo here, grammatically this doesn't work.
Yeah, if you're looking for a proofreader anyway, don't hand it to me. Jesus.
But I just wanted to know that the story with a capital S worked.
Yeah.
Because again, if that doesn't work, none of the rest matters. It's like building a house with a really shit structure. Like there's no, I don't know, columns and beams. Like just the actual frame of the house is made of, I don't know, Swiss cheese. But then you're worrying about like a lick of paint in the corner.
Yeah. And it's like, mate, as soon as it hits 29 degrees, your house is going to fucking melt. Maybe don't worry about the paint right now.
If it lasts till the heat wave, I'm hungry. But like, it's true. Like you don't worry about all the little stuff until the big stuff's in place. So again, that story, I wanted feedback on structurally whether it worked, like certain things. Did I go too far? Does this fit with this? Does this make sense? And then once that feedback comes back, I can then comb through it and go, okay, I can confidently start polishing this story.
Yeah.
And so before we go into that part, let's talk a little bit about the right reader. What does the right reader mean, sir?
Yeah, this is really important, I think. And I think there's two parts to this. And the first part, obviously, is the right reader is someone that when you put this out into the world, the right reader to like beta or critique or whatever is someone that would walk into a bookshop, see your book, pick it up, buy it, and take it home and read it. And that person probably isn't your Auntie Linda. It's not likely to be like your partner or your mum. Like maybe it could be, and like there's an exception for every rule, but in the most part, you're looking for readers that love the genre and subgenre of what you are writing. I know there are some people that will only give it to other writers, and that's fine as long as, again, those writers are like readers of the thing. Because, you know, like I could write a fantasy romance, and I mean it's very unlikely that I would, but I could, and then hand it to Dan to read, and great, Dan, you know, would be able to tell me like, yeah, it's got good writing action, this is this. But as someone that isn't a like voracious reader of fantasy romance, there's going to be so much in there that either Dan would get wrong in the feedback, because like he wouldn't understand that these are conventions of that genre that need to be there, or that he would miss because he doesn't understand the conventions of the genre and what needs to be there. So you really need to, if you're writing romance, you need to give it to romance readers, because if you've missed a beat, they will tell you. They will be like, this this isn't great. But if you're just giving it to someone because you're scared to give it to other people, or like it's easy to hand it to like your best mate or whatever, it might feel easier in the moment, but you really are cheating yourself, and more importantly, you're cheating the reader, because you're not getting that valid feedback. And the second type of person that you want to give it to, so they have to fulfill the first criteria for it to actually be valid, and really try and get more than one person if you can, like just a few people. Like at this point, if you're just looking for main like plot points and stuff, and it's not like a full like beta kind of thing, like it doesn't have to be an army of people. And let's be honest, most of us who are like just starting out, just trying to figure out where to find these people is its own thing. But what's really important as well is that the people that you give this to need to not be complete and utter assholes. And by that, I mean, they need to give you constructive feedback without being dicks about it, because rightfully so, your creation at this point is at a very tender point. Like you have put a lot into it. You know, you've spent a long time, especially if this is your first like work, you'll have spent a long time on it. You're just figuring out, you're getting your feet wet, all the rest of it. The last thing you need is to hand it to someone that is just going to basically crush your confidence as a writer. So I mean, I would argue that when you give these people things, if you've got some kind of like form or just like points to help them, because most people will either want to stroke your ego, or on the opposite end of the spectrum, if they're arseholes, just rip it apart. And neither of those things are helpful. Neither of them are. So like if you've got a couple of points like where did you like want to put it down, or like who was your favorite character, why, what was the most exciting moment, was there something that you felt like wasn't necessary, things that like are going to be helpful in the development of it. So just make sure like I say, it's a reader of the genre. And if you can get specific niche subgenres as well. So like, fantasy is a huge genre, horror is a huge genre. So like, cosmic horror and splattergore horror, two very different things. So
well, let's quickly like put that in perspective. Like I've been writing horror for what is coming up to 8 years now, and I've just discovered my niche.
Yeah. So just trying to find someone that reads in your genre, and specifically kind of the subgenre you're reading, is important. And I'm going to hand over to Dan, because I think Dan probably will have potentially some tips of where to find these people, because I think that is honestly one of the biggest stumbling blocks, because it's fine and easy for me and for you to sit here and be like, it must be a reader, but like if this is your first novel and you're kind of sat in your room by yourself in the dark writing away, terrified to tell anyone about it, like where do you find these fucking people? Dan.
Before I get into that, I do want to say that like I come to these episodes and I put like a few notes and I'm like, oh yeah, this will last around like 15-20 minutes of discussion, and then we get into it and I'm like, no,
you've met me, right?
Well, not just you, but like the subject itself, like it's huge. Just again to like quickly touch on a couple of points that you mentioned, like the readers really do need to know the tropes of what you're trying to write. I've had people hand me short stories before, because I used to offer like a short story editing service, and they've said like, oh, this is a horror story, I'd like you to edit it because you're a horror author. And I've read the story and gone, this isn't a horror story. Like it has a bit of murder in it. That's not a horror story. It's a thriller suspense, let's be honest. And you're right, like I will read I've read books that aren't in my genre, and I've said specifically to people, I can give you the structural elements of what a story contains, but I can't, like, don't take the word as gospel. Give this to readers in your genre. Like I can help you with putting up the tent, but like someone else needs to make the walls out of Swiss cheese. I don't like Swiss cheese. I don't even know where it's coming from.
Well, because it's got its own built-in windows.
It does. It's perfect. Like portholes on every wall.
Shit, if it floods, you're absolutely screwed.
Yeah. But yeah, it really, like, so much of this comes to mindset, and what I'm about to say will play into how to find the readers. But what we have to accept is when we're learning to write, we're not a finished product.
No.
In order to effectively grow as a writer, you have to have a growth mindset. And this is where a lot of people struggle, because rightly so, like the first time you write a story, it's delicate, it's precious, like you say, it's very, very fragile, which is why I said it's quite difficult to give your story to a reader earlier, because you're like, but I haven't shown everything that I'm capable of. If you can get confident in the stuff that you don't know, or the fact that you don't know stuff, that is the fastest way to grow, because by giving an unfinished story to 5 or 6 like good readers, getting feedback to know where your gaps in knowledge are, there's no better way to grow as an author. And I will quickly add on to that as well. Like, it doesn't. I'll go into how to find these readers. So the first one would be to hire a developmental editor. And so one of the tricks that actually I had no idea of, but this was given to me by Pan in our community, which was fucking genius.
Yes.
I didn't think of this before.
Really was, actually.
If you've written a book, let's say, I don't know, 60, 100,000 words, and you want to get just useful feedback, but you know that a developmental edit, rightly so, is going to cost a fair bit of money. Like, they can cost upwards of like 500 to £1,000 to £1,500.
Yeah, depending on how much,
What you can do is go and approach a developmental editor and say, look, if I give you the first 5,000 words of my story, can you give me as much information as possible about my writing? And obviously, the editor themselves are not going to give you the full structural framework whether your story works, but they're going to give you some really good tips on the things that you might potentially be lacking and need to grow, and the stuff that you do well within that 5,000 words. Like, as an editor,
sorry, I was going to say it's a good sample length to figure out things that, like, you know, like crutch words and stuff, and
it's not gonna
kind of thing.
It's not gonna just steal money from your wallet. So if you are worried about putting it out to just real life readers, then that's a way to go. Obviously, as I say, you're not going to get the full structural frame, but you are going to get some idea on what you do well. But in terms of finding readers, like, I generally, over time, I've accrued a group of very dedicated readers that do read my work, and give me feedback and help. And honestly, it was just a case of, for me, growing my list, which is very, very difficult to do. But coming back to that mindset of wanting to grow and just wanting to put stuff out there, there are floods of Facebook groups, there are websites, reading groups where people, you know, love reading. Even locally, there'll be reading groups that work on certain books and things. Like, I started off my career in a writing group, which arguably wasn't the best for critique and feedback, but it did help grow my confidence as a writer. But honestly, if you just reach out to lots of potential groups, lots of potential people, 1 or 2 might come back, and it's just those 1 or 2 that you need to begin with.
Yeah.
That said, like you said earlier, they might not be the best reader, but they will start giving some kind of feedback. Like, they might not be kind about it, maybe they're not the best, but you have to start somewhere.
Yeah, and I think that's the tricky thing, is that, like, much like every other part of this process, it is trial and error. And you know, you can find all these places where you can get beta readers, or, you know, people that are happy to read it and critique it. So, like you say, you know, there's lots of different Facebook groups. There was one of, what I'm trying to remember what the service was. One of our members was talking about it, that is now offering beta readers, like, you can put your book up for
NetGalley. Story Origin does.
Story Origin, there we go.
NetGalley.
Yeah, so there are these places that you can specifically look for people, but, like, what you just bear in mind that it's in many ways the same as dating. Like, you know, people will present themselves as something, and not everyone is going to be who they present themselves as. So just, like, as you're putting that out, just know that, and know that, you know, this is your first book. You're not going to, unless you are the luckiest son of a bitch in the world, you're not going to, like, you know, stumble upon the perfect 10 beta readers, like, first go out.
No. Even now, like, when I put out a new book, I've got a list of, I think it's about 30, and this is when I'm doing, like, publishing a book and it's ARC readers. A list of 30 ARC readers, and probably about 14 of those are reliable at this point. It wasn't originally, but I always have to comb like the group and bring in new people and offer it to new readers on my list. Like they're not always going to be reliable, because you have to understand that people have lives and they have things that they want to do, and they're not always going to be tied into delivering something for you for free all the time.
And a book is a big thing.
A book is a huge thing, especially if it's 150,000 words. If you're listening to this, you know who you are. But you've mentioned a couple of times as well, like this idea of a critique partner, which I think is powerful and lots of people have, which acts as this sort of beta reader. So a critique partner is another writer within your genre, preferably, who you exchange that kind of service with. So you'll read their work, they'll read your work, you give criticism and things back. And that can be a very, very useful way, because you're giving the book to other writers to assess who are also readers of that genre. And again, like specifically look for someone who reads that genre, not just a writer in general, because again, writers will know the structural framework, they won't know the tropes and all the nuances of what your genre is. And readers are of a different breed to writers. So if you can get both bits of feedback, awesome. But I always prioritize reader feedback, because that is who I'm trying to reach. And if I'm not a reader, that I failed as a writer.
Yeah, I think that's really important. Like, just again, if they're not in your genre, they're going to miss so much. They're going to miss so much, or they're going to critique stuff that isn't relevant, because people that read people that read thrillers, for example, aren't going to enjoy like the slow, lazy pace of, I don't know, like a summer cozy mystery that like starts off like, they're not going to enjoy that, because they're used to bang, 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 and they will critique it for that. And if you take that and run with it, then when you release it to people, I mean, I'm saying cozy, I have no fucking clue what the tropes are, but I'm just so like, again, take this with a pinch of salt, but like, you release it to your actual readers and they're like, why is this so aggressively fast? Like, where's the cute dog? Why didn't the person get killed with an icing bag? I don't understand. Like, we
might have to do like, it'll be a lot of the same information, but just a whole separate one on like the readers, finding the right readers. But back onto mindset, one thing that I do suggest to people that I see come across, and this is very, very difficult, especially when you're sort of much more green to writing, when trying to find readers, imposter syndrome will rear its ugly head. You are writing a book, you are stepping into an arena in which you have no qualification, no verification, no like validation.
This is going.
Yeah, and one of the things I see a lot of people do is like, well, how do I reach readers when I'm like, it's my first story? And the advice that I give is that readers don't give a shit. Like, they don't care if it's your first story, they don't care if it's your 20th, they just want a good experience. And if you think of it from a reader perspective rather than you as a writer, because as a writer, you're going like, well, my writing's not up to scratch, why should I give it to anyone? As a reader, they're going, oh my God, like I might get to read the birth of a new author, or, I might get to like read a brand new story while it's being constructed. Like, for a reader, that's fucking massive. Like, readers want to be a part of the process. And so I often tell people not, especially, and this is specifically for self-publishing as opposed to publishing. I tell people not to announce that they are a debut author, or not that it's their first book. Like, this is my first book, can you please read it? What is very different is going like, I'm writing a new book. Would you like to read it? Because that insecurity of saying this is my first book is you justifying to yourself that you're kind of like, it's accounting for any of those mistakes that might come as a new author that might not even be there. It might all be in your head. If you're traditionally published, obviously, like, debut author is huge because they're announcing a new author to this massive like arena. Whereas as a self-pubbed author, like, it sounds like trickery. It's not. It's just negating that part that is your imposter syndrome as opposed to the reader experience. Because a reader's never going to pick up a book. Like, the amount of books I've picked up and been like, is this their first book? No, I don't care. Like, is this a good book? Is all I care about. So when trying to find new readers, beta readers, any of that stuff, like, do try and avoid being like, this is my first ever book. Do you mind like trying to just say like, I have a book. Would you like to read it?
And I can like, I'll give a very crass metaphor or example of this, which hopefully will make sense. So if people watch any kind of like X Factor, Britain's Got Talent, anything like that, right? 90% of the time before that person starts singing or whatever thing, if they're going to be like good or not, because based on your comfort level of them walking onto the stage, right? Like, and it is an entertainer's job when they come onto the stage to make the audience immediately comfortable.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not about how they feel about themselves. That's about them honoring their job and looking after the audience. So when someone walks on and they look confident and everything, you can breathe out, you can sit down, you can relax, and you're going to be like, this is going to be good.
Yeah.
Right. It's the same thing. So saying like, I'm working on a new book, do you want to read it, is walking onto stage confidently.
Mm-hmm.
Like saying, so I'm trying this thing at writing, and it's like it's my first time of it, so you know it's probably going to be mistakes and things, but it would really mean a lot to me actually if do you mind like going in like that is you know, you walking onto stage, you're making excuses before you start, and the audience is tense and they don't want to look at the stage. It makes them feel very uncomfortable because they're aware they're about to witness something that is not going to be great. And
Mm-hmm.
even if that person walking on and is nervous and is about to start singing with a voice to rival Christina Aguilera, which I doubt, it's like it's going to take a while for that audience to warm up to it.
Yeah.
Because they're too tense. So it's important to give that right energy. That's part of your job.
Yeah, and you're not lying. There's a moment in what is arguably now quite a problematic film, Beyond the Sea, which is about it's a biopic about Bobby Darin's life, played by Kevin Spacey. Let's ignore that part. But there's a part in that where his kind of, as his career has gone on, his like hair starts thinning, he gets older, he gets out of the game for a bit, and he tries to come back. And he's sat on stage and he's playing guitar, and like he's just kind of like, you know, again, balding hair, just like kind of in shabby clothes, just, and people are basically booing and laughing at him. And then one of his relatives he's like, why did it suck so bad? And one of his relatives come on and just go like, because people hear what they see. And so he does the song again in a different place, but this time he's actually made an effort. He's put a suit on, like he is the old version of himself, and people fucking love it. And it's kind of that principle. You're not lying, you're not hiding anything. You're just saying like, I have a book. Like, if you want to be a writer, choose to be a writer, because no one else is going to give you that permission and start. We should probably like crack through the rest.
Let's move on. So we talked about like breaking it into its like bigger components first. So make sure the story works, like tackle that.
Yeah.
Characters, all those kind of big meaty parts that make the story what it is. And then you give it to people. And then when you get that feedback, then you act on the feedback. Now, acting on the feedback does not mean that you do everything that they tell you to do. It means that you look for common themes. And if you are like fortunate enough to say to have found 10 people and they all say the same thing about like midway through, I don't know, act 2, this didn't work for me, then look at it. If one person says it, then like you can look at it, but you know, at the end of the day, it's your story. Do you agree with it? Do you disagree with it? So you take that feedback and you work it into the story.
You take the feedback. I do know writers that like they'll get a lot of feedback from readers that have like a very common problem, and they'll just go, but they don't get it. It's like, no, like if
they don't, and that's a problem.
If 9 of 10 of your readers have gone like, this isn't good for us, what's the point in asking them if you're not going to take that feedback?
Put you like it's difficult, but put your goddamn ego aside. Like,
yeah, I mean, we had a talk last night on a project that we're working on where one guy basically suggested something that a listener had told him, and rightly so, the question was asked, well, how many people have said this? And it was like 1. It's like, well, we're not changing it then. Like unless lots of people have this problem. And you know, with the Other Stories podcast, we've had like 10 million downloads now over the last 6 years, and there have been a few times where one person has been quite vocal and said like, we need to change this, and then we've looked at the bigger picture and gone like, no one else has been mentioning this. Just because you have a loud voice doesn't mean you're right.
No. And the thing is, like, you're always going to get that thing. The more people see something, the more you're going to get like people's opinions. And it's just knowing the difference between someone's opinion, their personal preference, and like a trend of you're not serving your audience in this area.
Annoyingly, if people are happy, they're often quiet.
Yes. Yes, that is very true. Yeah, so you take the feedback and you implement it in the way that is helpful to your story. And then, I mean, at that point, I would argue that you're kind of like, once you've worked it, you've got readers' feedback, all the rest of it. I would argue that it's a good time to get kind of a little bit more granular. I mean, have I missed a step? Obviously, you are much more.
No, I think the reason most of the episodes contained has gone into the story and the finding the readers because they are the biggest points of the story. Again, like if the framework isn't in place, like the rest of it doesn't matter. Once the readers have come back with feedback, and once you kind of know roughly what to implement, I mean, I will say it's never easy to know specifically how to tweak a chapter or how to put in whatever it is that a reader has given you as feedback. It just comes with time and experience, which is an annoying thing to say. But obviously, like you say, you kind of get a bit more granular. You start to look at like the paragraphs, a bit more of the sentence structure, and try and look more at like dialogue and things. And then your final pass, I love. I think it was Luke that said this to me, but like the final pass is poetry. It's where you like sprinkle in all the nuances. That's when you start to get really granular on word choice and everything else. And that is broadly the view on how to edit. You go from the big stuff and you work your way down. What we haven't specifically mentioned are the different levels of, paid editors. We've mentioned developmental edits, which are obviously very, very useful. And this goes down to your budget level. When I first started writing, I didn't have a lot of money for editing, so I didn't have editors. Like I self-edited my first book. I put that up. When I was on my first novels, that was with Luke. So back and forth, we had each other to critique and to help. And we did use beta readers. We used a proofreader, but we didn't have any of those kind of editors. But also I will mention that I worked as an editor and a copy editor and proofreader for a few years. So I have a little bit of that background. In terms of the levels of paid editors you can use along the way, developmental editors, if you can afford one, are a fantastic place to start, especially once you've got that first draft and you've kind of potentially polished through some of the story points. A developmental editor, I don't think that the further on in your career you go, I don't necessarily think you always need one. I think start with one to learn all the things that you need to learn. And then, if you want to use one in the future to top up and to keep learning, like absolutely, but I don't think it's always necessary, which is a very controversial thing to say in today's writing economy. You have line editors who will go through your story sort of line by line and look much more abstractly as how the story relates, again with a capital S. So they'll make sure that your lines flow and that they're achieving, the theme and the tone and all the nuances of conflict and resolution that you're after, making sure the tension's growing. Your line editor will sort of look a bit more closely than a developmental editor who focuses more on structure and things. Your copy editor, now this is something that people get confused about because you have line editing, you have copy editing. The line editing, as I say, is the more stylistic, abstract focus on story. A copy editor's role traditionally is to prepare a manuscript for a typesetter. It's the person that formats your book. So if you go back to sort of the way publishing was, a copy editor, and this was a lot of what I did for non-fiction journals, you'll look through, you'll catch typos, you'll catch sort of like clunky sentences, weird word choices. If you're working in non-fiction, you'll fact check, you'll make sure that everything fits within a house style, and you'll mark up a manuscript so that a typesetter can just go like H1, okay, this needs to be a big edit, like kind of like with if you're into coding and things like the different code tags, a typesetter will then go through and do that. So that's kind of what copy editing is. It's very much more flat and focused on the final print version as opposed to the story. Which again, like the invisible step that we don't need to talk about too much then comes into formatting. And that's when your proofreading comes in. Because I know a lot of people who proofread and then they'll format. But the point of the proofread is to be the final vanguard against bad.
You do not touch.
No, once a book is proofread, it is done.
Step away, Sandra.
So done. So don't waste your money proofreading when you're halfway through a story, please. Please. It is the final go-to step. But that's broadly the way through: developmental, line, copy, edit, typesetting, and proofreading, and then you have yourself something of a finished story. But at the bulk of it, start big, work your way down. Don't worry about word choice in the beginning. At the end, your story should be in place that you can just focus specifically on the word choice. And I love the final pass, because the final pass really is like, how do I make this flow? How do I make this poetic? How do I like show off language and all that kind of stuff?
Yeah.
But that's a broad roundabout circuit into how to edit.
Yeah, I just want to, it occurs to me that, like, number one, this episode is long. So I'm going to try and be,
As it should be.
I'm going to try and be brief-ish with this. But number two, obviously, this is, you know, how you edit, and we've talked through the different kind of steps and all the rest of it. But I think if this is your very first time, and we've said, so, you know, the first thing you need to like focus on is the big things, you might still have that question yet of like, cool, how? So if this is of any use to anybody, when I looked at my manuscript for the very first time, there were a few things that I focused on. And so things like, is this scene that I'm looking at right now, can I tell, like, as a reader, where it's set? So like grounding the scene. So is it, you know, do I know where in the worlds, wherever it is? Do I know what time of day it is? Do I know what the weather is? Do I know if they're inside or outside? Like, do I know the point, like, of this scene? Does it drive the story? Does it drive the characters? Just asking these kind of questions, you know, did the character who, you know, was instrumental in the last scene, and they had you know, something very important to say, did they get to say it in this scene? Just things like that to start with are helpful, because it is huge and it does feel very overwhelming. But the truth is, you can't edit a manuscript in one like go. You have to take it page by page. And so if you can ask yourself those kind of simple questions, and there's lots of like different there's lots of different books and resources and things that will help you, especially if it's your first time through, just kind of trying to figure out these things. But I really do think the most important things to ask yourself are like, is the scene grounded? Does the reader understand, like, where, when, how, why, all those basic things of the scene? Are the people in the scene, are they all necessary? And if they are, do they all contribute as they should in that scene? And what is the scene or chapter's like main objective? Why did you write it? Like, when I plan out, I literally have that written. It's an actor thing. What's my motivation? I need to know why that is there. And so either you've already got that, like, say, if you know, your first draft, you've been planning it through that way, you either already know why you want that scene there, and in which case you can check that it matches and that it's delivering what you want it to, or you can think, okay, what is the point of this? Luna's having a little dance in the background.
She is loving life,
so
right?
cute.
She's been rolling on the sofa and now she's stretching.
Or just have a little think, like, okay, what's the objective of this chapter? Why is it relevant in the story, if it is relevant? And then when you know that, it's easier then to go through that and figure out, like, does it need to be bigger? Does it need to be smaller? And when you know the point of each of those scenes as well, you know if you need to add stuff. You know if you need to add extra scenes in. So I would say that's just if this is your very first go at it and you're not quite sure, just start with those basics of, you know, of the things I've just said. I mean, have I missed anything?
No, I mean, I would use, because I use Scrivener to write, I would go into what they call corkboard view, where you basically have each chapter appear as like a little post-it on the corkboard. And then in those notes, I will just one line, what does this scene do? I can see from a very top level, like, okay, does that add anything? And I think for me, I'm very, very visual. I'm very like motivated as I write. Like, I see it almost like as a film in my head. And so I will kind of look at this and go, would I be bored watching this film at this point? Like you say, does this add anything? Is this just a superfluous character for no reason? And I very much look for a couple of things, which are the arcs of the characters, to make sure that something's actually happening with the characters and they're not just flat.
Yeah.
The arc of the story. So looking at like sort of story structure of what's Freytag's pyramid, it's exposition, rising action, climax, falling action, and then resolution. Like, are those 5 points met, and where are they met? Because a story needs to have that rise and fall. And that's kind of my starting point, just to make sure that they feel like they're there and that everything at the end resolves what happened at the beginning. And that is really why it's important to sort of know story structure. Like I went on a bit of a journey end of last year into sort of refamiliarizing myself with a lot of this story structure stuff, because like I took it for granted that, you know, I've studied English for years, I've studied acting as well for years. So I kind of like, inherently is the wrong word, but like absorbed a lot of the idea of story structure. And I watch a lot of film, I watch a lot of, and read a lot of books. So like I kind of by that point know how a story should feel, which is a very thing to say. I get like it's just
it's true though. Like you do
right.
like through
It needs a little bit
osmosis.
more,
yeah.
You know, it needs a little, you know, like it just hasn't.
Yeah. Oh, you're a designer's dream.
Oh, mate, don't.
That's an entirely different episode.
But yeah. And for people interested, I am working very, very slowly on a course to do all this stuff. So I think that'll be very, very helpful for people. But yeah, I think to be fair, we packed a lot of information there. We should probably wrap up there. But I think just if I could say two things to anyone to really, really like drill home some of the most effective ways to improve your writing and to edit your story. Number one, read a lot.
Yep.
Number two, get feedback. That's it's terrifying. Like I get it, it's terrifying. But when you see feedback less as a criticism on you and more as a data point, everything unlocks. Because if you're in this for the long haul, if you want to write a book, if you want to write many, many books, you have to see that that's just a part of the process. Like you have to be able to, like, it's, I don't like when people say like, I've hardened myself to criticism. It's not hardening yourself to criticism. It's just accepting that criticism isn't a negative thing on you, positive thing to push your story forward. Only in knowing what you suck at can you then get better at it and fix it. And again, that's why I created the author activation matrix.
Nice. Yeah, that was a really good callback. It was so seamless.
So fucking smooth.
Yeah.
Any last takeaways for you, Sam, on this episode?
I would just say, please remember that especially if this is your first book that you're going through all of this process, it's going to be uncomfortable. It's going to feel downright painful. Sometimes you're going to want to run away. That's normal. That's part of the process. And just please remember that your first book is not an indicator of your career as a writer, as Dan would say. Like, you know, with any other career, your first shot at something, you would understand that's exactly what it is. But for some reason, particularly creative careers, particularly writing, we figure if the first book that we put out, if people are telling us that it's bad or that it sucks, that we can't write, that's it, we're dead, we can't write, the end. So just please remember that it's if you're wanting to do this as a career, as you know, then you need to do it as a career. Like masters of their craft are masters because they've mastered the craft, and you can't do that in one book.
My first novel was a pile of Swiss cheese. A couple of quick resources just for people who might want to know where to find editors should they wish to. Readsy.com is a fantastic resource for finding editors, finding a lot of like author services that you might find beneficial. I think it's Ricardo over at Readsy, met a couple of times at conferences and things, and is a fantastic chap doing amazing things. So readsy.com, REEDSY. And also our good friend Joanna Penn over at thecreativepenn.com has an article which basically lists a bunch of ways to find good editors, and that's thecreativepenn.com/editors, resources and links in show notes, which they already are because I'm fucking on it in 2023. From us, just a reminder that you can get a whole host of free resources and a growing library of stuff over at activatedauthors.com/surprise free. Not surprise, just free. You get the author activation matrix. I've also put the self-publishing checklist on there. So if you want to just, you know, tick off the things as you do them, as you're writing your book and getting it ready for publication, that's over there. And I guess there's nothing else to say other than a massive thank you to you, the listeners, for tuning in. We appreciate you and the time you choose to spend with us each and every week. And as always, if you're looking to level up your writing and activate your author career, head on over to activatedauthors.com to find out all about our community, our resources, and everything else that we've got going on. One more time from myself and from Sam, we will see you next week.
Goodbye.
Bye.
Activate your energy.